Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're investigating a massive macroeconomic mystery that's been unfolding in India's agricultural sector. It's one of those topics that absolutely challenges everything we think we know about government subsidies, financial intervention, and farming output. We're basically looking at a classic detective story of economics here. It's this bizarre disconnect between a skyrocketing financial supply and stubbornly stagnant farm output. You see, the assumption has always been pretty straightforward, right? If you give farmers more access to credit, they're going to grow more food. But what happens when the data shows the exact opposite? Well, that right there is the heart of the agricultural credit paradox. Now, what's really fascinating is this stark divergence we're seeing. Billions upon billions are being pumped into agriculture, yet the share of agricultural GDP and actual food production is falling. Credit disbursements are surging straight upward, while crop yields are just slumping downward. I mean, how is it even possible that with all this capital flowing into the system, agriculture's share of the total GDP dropped from over 36% down to just 18.5%? To put the real-world stakes into perspective, despite all of this credit, the per capita availability of cereals actually dropped from 192 kilograms down to 174 kilograms. That's hitting levels we haven't seen since the 1970s. Pulses saw a really similar decline too. So we aren't just talking about abstract economic theories here. We're talking about actual food on the table for over 1 billion people. To solve this case, we're going to follow 5 exact investigation steps. We'll start with the macroeconomic paradox, then decode the credit channels, navigate the endogeneity data trap, uncover the district-level revelation, and finally look at redefining agricultural policy. Section 1. The macroeconomic paradox. Let's examine the scene of the crime, where throwing money at the problem just hasn't yielded the expected crop output. Section 2. Decoding the credit channels. To identify our suspects here, we really have to understand that agricultural credit is not just a single monolithic thing. There is a massive difference between direct finance, which provides instant liquidity to individual farmers, and indirect finance, which supports supply chains and infrastructure but has a delayed impact. Direct finance is your typical crop loan, right? It lets a farmer buy seeds and fertilizer today. Indirect finance, on the other hand, goes to input dealers, state electricity boards, or NGOs to build things like storage facilities. You simply cannot measure their impact on the exact same timeline. Section 3, the endogeneity data trap. So why did previous studies fail to catch this crucial nuance? We really have to ask ourselves why measuring the impact of this credit is inherently flawed when using standard economic tools. If you just run a basic regression comparing credit amounts to crop yields across the country, your results are going to tell you that credit doesn't work. But actually, that's just a mathematical illusion. Standard regressions fall into what's known as an endogeneity trap. It happens because banks naturally lend more to regions with good weather and past successes, which creates a bias loop that completely scrambles the data. Think about it. A bank wants its money back, for sure. They aren't handing out loans randomly. They lend to the districts that already have good irrigation and low risk. So, are the high yields caused by the credit, or is the credit caused by the expected high yields? Without isolating that bias, standard models are just flying completely blind. On top of that, if we just look at 20 massive state-level blocks, this aggregation blurs the reality and makes the true impact of localized credit totally invisible. Agriculture is intensely localized. The soil, the rainfall, the specific farming practices, they vary wildly, not just from state to state, but from district to district. Averaging all that data out across an entire massive state just washes away the vital details. Section 4, the district-level revelation. Let's see how this picture changes when we zoom in our magnifying glass from the state level down to the district level. By changing our focal length to district-level data, we can finally strip away that regional noise and control for unobserved local quirks. To do this, researchers used Difference GMM, which stands for Generalized Method of Moments. I know, it sounds a bit intimidating, but it's basically a highly sophisticated econometric filter designed for this exact situation. Lots of districts, tracked over a few years, where the variables influence each other. It filters out the bank's lending bias and isolates the actual pure impact of the credit. And just like that, the invisible suddenly becomes visible. It proves that credit actually does work, but only if we measure direct amounts and indirect accounts on entirely different timelines. When researchers applied this GMM filter to district-level data across states like Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Punjab, and West Bengal, the true drivers of output finally lit up on the board. So the absolutely crucial point is right here. Direct credit acts as a liquidity engine, boosting immediate output by 0.11%. Meanwhile, indirect credit acts systemic infrastructure, requiring a one-year gestation effect to show a 0.23% output surge. Notice the vital distinction on the indirect side. It wasn't the total amount of indirect credit that drove the output. That was statistically insignificant. It was the total number of indirect accounts. Expanding the sheer reach of the network is what mattered, and it took a full year for that infrastructure to translate into higher crop yields. Beyond just buying seeds, access to credit provides something economists call consumption smoothing. This is a massive revelation. Agriculture is a crazy risky business. When farmers have access to the formal banking system, they don't just use it to grow more. They use it as an economic shock absorber to survive the bad times without having to sell off their core assets. What this means is financial inclusion actually acts as an incredible climate shock absorber, shielding farmers so that a 1% drop in rainfall doesn't absolutely devastate their overall output. Without credit, a 1% deviation in rain drops output by nearly 0.8%. But once the GMM model controlled for the number of credit accounts, that severe vulnerability dropped significantly. The formal banking network acts like an umbrella, softening the blow of nature. Section 5. Redefining agricultural policy. With the mystery solved, we finally reach the verdict on how agricultural policy must urgently adapt. The paradox is resolved by realizing that throwing capital volume directly at farmers solves today's problems, but expanding the sheer number of indirect accounts secures the resilience of tomorrow. If a government only measures its success by the total rupees dispersed, it's going to be completely blind to building systemic capacity. You need the direct capital volume to fuel the immediate liquidity engine, but you desperately need the indirect account penetration to build that resilience shield. To fix the system, policymakers must follow 3 key steps. First, decentralize data tracking down to the district level. Second, mandate the penetration of new bank accounts rather than just tracking money volume. And third, balance the portfolio between immediate direct liquidity and long-term indirect resilience. We really have to stop looking at massive national aggregates that hide the truth and start rewarding banks for pulling marginalized farmers away from informal, high-interest moneylenders and into the formal safety net. As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to ask yourself, how might this profound realization about measuring the resolution of delivery change the way we evaluate other massive government subsidies worldwide? Whether we're talking about healthcare, education, or infrastructure, perhaps we're all spending way too much time counting the velocity of the money flowing out and not nearly enough time looking at the district-level resolution of how that money is actually being delivered. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the data. Keep questioning the numbers, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.